I'm Rob Rothschild. I'm the Marketing Director here at the Center for Applications of Psychological Type, and we're here to have a conference call with the co-author of the Murphy-Myskire Type Indicator for Children, Dr. Elizabeth Murphy, and she is the guru on all things about type in children. And just so you know, we are recording this conversation so we can mount it on our website later on for other folks who may have missed the meeting. And the structure today is pretty much open question and answer. And we're going to let Elizabeth start with a topic that we sort of pre-selected, and that I'll let you take it away, Elizabeth, but we're talking about bringing type into the classroom and honoring differences and tips for teachers to do that. So here we go. Elizabeth, go for it.
Okay, and please feel free to interrupt me with questions or comments as we go through, anybody online. Trevor raises a real point that a lot of our teachers are facing in that the requirements of the job are getting more and more demanding and financial resources are becoming less. So classrooms are becoming larger and everything else about it. So to find a system that is interested in hearing all about the theory before they get the application, it's getting more difficult. Although you'll find them individually who are very interested in knowing how can I help my child learn better, what can I do more in my classroom. But what I have never found is a teacher willing to turn down a good idea. So sometimes when I'm working with staff, I go in with just some good ideas to use. I know they're founded and based on type theory. So I know they're well-grounded. There's a good reason why this is going to work. All they know is, oh, I could try that in my class tomorrow. And then when that one works, they go, that was really good. Do you have another one? I go, well, actually, I do. So then you give them another idea that's going to work. And by the time you've given them 3 or 4 and 5 ideas, and you go, you know, this is all based on understanding about normal differences in children that I'd be glad to share with you if you ever want to, all of a sudden I have a much more interested population, because they're able to see that the ideas that are founded on that theory do make a difference with the children. I don't remember if I mentioned any ideas in the last session, but even my daughter teaches chemistry, high school chemistry, in advanced placement, and so a lot of the kids there just want to jump ahead, and as soon as the adolescent intuitive thinks they understand what you're saying, they really want to move on because they're just so eager to know everything they can about life and learning and subjects. But other students want that confirmation learning. People make a mistake thinking if you need 2 or 3 or 4 examples, it's because you didn't get it. And it's very important to understand that for our sensing learners, they understood what you said the first time, but the second, the third, and the fourth examples are confirmation that that learning is accurate, that they heard it accurately. But all the teacher has to do is explain her motives or his motives to the class by saying, some of you will have 1 example and be ready to move forward, and some of you will want 2, 3, 4, and even 5 examples to confirm that you have heard it accurately and that it is a well-founded piece of information that you can now store in your memory banks. So if I give more examples than you might personally value, respect that that's for some of the other members of the class. And they're fine with it. They're not fine when they think the teacher is just giving another example because the teacher loves examples. But as long as it's for the other learners in the class, they're very comfortable with it. And it changes the whole tone of the room because now the motive for the teacher's instructional style is geared toward the learning needs of the group. So they might then say another time, some of you learners are going to enjoy having a chance to discuss the ideas before you work on that science worksheet, that chemistry formula, and some of you are going to prefer to kind of work on the formula, process it yourself before you check with your partners and make sure that you're doing it in similar ways and getting similar answers. Now, those who know type theory know all we did was do an EI sort. The teacher may not even know they did an EI sort. But if they do that and let the children self-select, they're acknowledging by their action that there are ways to respect diversity in this classroom. And the only thing we're trying to do is help each of you master the material. Because in no way, using type, do you ever excuse the child from learning everything that's to be learned. But it is refreshing if you have a child who's not getting it, and you say, oh, so that voice wasn't so clear for you. Let's try it this way and see if that makes sense, because some learners like it with the broad strokes, and some learners like it with the specifics first and then the broad. So let's try it that way and see if that makes more sense to you. Now, all of a sudden, it's about style and not about competency, and you get a whole different tone in the classroom. So when I'm working with teams of teachers who are overwhelmed, and I go in with just 2, 3, or 4 ideas that they can try and know that it's going to work and see that it works, you have a lot of credibility when you go back in the second time. And once the teachers accept that this seems to be a valid way of describing diversity, then they're very eager, especially when I say, but our real goal is to help the learner understand about these differences, because the learner has to manage their life, their way of processing information. And the younger they are when we teach them how to manage it best for them, the better. If we wait until you're in college to get your learning style, or in some cases where they would assess the child's learning style but then not tell the child, you defeat the purpose of self-management. And that would be one of the goals that I would think is a valid use of the MTIC tool, is to help the child discover their best way of getting things done. So any reaction to the idea of just introducing a few ideas at a time to teachers?
That makes sense.
I think it's a great way to approach it. It's a little less scary than coming right in with terminology about personality type. I think it's, seems easier.
Right. It does go back to what Nathan had said earlier about it can't happen all at one time. Mm-hmm. It's like a little bit over time, but then it becomes well entrenched, and because it's user-friendly, versus let me have a day of training and I'll tell you all about it, and we'll even have some wonderful fun activities, but then the staff will leave and not feel confident about applying those concepts well with the children, and then it gets put on the shelf. Right. And type only works if you're using it. You can put the book on the shelf. Thanks to Isabel, we were able to get it down and use it.
I agree as well. I'm from the outside of the school system, so I'm bringing in a project, but I'm bringing it in at the using type to manage the classroom first, and let them see how it helps them both manage the behavior, manage the good and bad behavior, manage the bad behavior, and create good behaviors in the classroom, rather than starting with improving grades or something that will require more knowledge. Hopefully,
right,
the next
and it does tend to improve grades because kids learn how to study smarter. Mm-hmm. I like the word when you said the good and the bad behavior, because with type, our language is always your strength or your stretch.
Yes.
The certain tasks are going to require you to stretch in order to be competent and use more energy to do them than others. But it sometimes helps teachers and parents actually sort the difference between what's acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. For instance, rude remarks are not acceptable behavior from any age. So if a child answers rudely and says, I hate that, I'm not doing that junk, that's not type. It's rudeness. So if a teacher wanted to say to that child, you have a message to say, but my ears only hear talk that is reasonable, and rudeness doesn't go through. So tell me again what you need, and we'll see if we can't solve it. And all of a sudden the child says, this seems stupid to have to do it this way. So it's okay. So our goal is that you need to be able to multiply fractions. And that's what we're learning today. And if there's a better way for you to practice multiplying fractions, I'm willing to solve that with you. But only if you negotiate and talk with me, not if you're rude. So again, they can see if there's an underlying type basis that's causing, if you honored that child's preferences, would there be less frustration, which is what we would anticipate. But at the same time, you don't have to say, oh, because that was type related, you're allowed to be rude to me when you make your remark. And I think helping some teachers and adults sort what is inappropriate behavior that needs to be stopped from what is a learning frustration that I can work with by adjusting the how, not the what. I can maintain the what by adjusting how I expect you to learn it. Is one way of coming into the use of type within the classroom.
A lot of information in that paragraph, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it happens, doesn't it?
Can't write fast enough.
I think the other strategy, if I had a limit on how many I could give a teacher to start with, the other strategy that I would give teachers to start, as well as parents actually, would be anytime there's an issue that I'm going to look at it through the 4 function lenses. I'm going to ask a sensing question, an intuitive question, a thinking question, and a feeling question. So maybe, maybe the question is as simple as, I took my granddaughter to see Taylor Swift, a concert on Saturday night. 55,000 Texans in that stadium. And right across the street, another 55,000 in the baseball stadium watching Texas win the first game. Parking was an issue whenever you're dealing with things like that. So if I were driving the kids and I would say, we might run into traffic, that could be the problem. What do we know about traffic around the stadiums when there's a lot of activity happening? There's going to be a lot of cars. They're going to back up. We might have to wait a long time. Okay. All right. What do we know about good ways to get there? Well, we know we always go down this road, and it gets us right in the stadium. But if that's going to be blocked from traffic, what else is possible? Now all of a sudden we're exploring that intuitive side about, well, we could do this, and it might be around, but we could look at the map and see what else there is and say, okay. And then what's going to happen if all of a sudden we just, no matter what our best methods are, we get stuck in traffic and we just don't get there for the beginning of the concert? What could happen? What would we do? Well, then they're going to explore whether they're going to go the empathetic route or whether they're going to problem solve. Well, it's still worth our ticket. We already spent the money. We need to go in. But you see what I'm saying? I could have just said to them, kids, there's traffic out there, and we're just going to have to live with it. And the only person's brain that was working was mine. But if I make them start to think in terms of what do we know, sensing, what else is possible, intuition, is it reasonable, is it a good decision, thinking, and how's it going to affect everybody, feeling, then if I get them to start thinking in those 4 veins, every time they have to process information or process and solve a problem, I'm automatically causing development to occur, and I'm increasing the breadth that they will use for solving personal problems and learning problems on their own. I know it's a skill we're trying to teach adults still, that whenever you go into a situation, think in terms of the 4 functions. And if you can broaden yourself to ask questions under each one of those domains, you're going to reach a better decision. And I have a lot of business examples of people who said, yeah, without that model, we would have forgotten to include this, and then all of a sudden our staff would have been working overtime. And instead, we just decided to get some temporary help to come in. Well, with the kids and with the teachers, I can't teach them about functions and everything else right away, but I can give them 4 good quality questions to ask. Like, what do we already know? What do we still need to know? How else could we solve this? What else is possible? Can we afford this? Is it reasonable? Is it workable? And how will this affect everybody? Who's going to have to work hard, or who's going to benefit from this? If they just started using those 4 questions whenever they reviewed a story, if there was a problem in the literature story, and what did the character know? What else could the character have done? Was that the smartest thing, and why? And how did it affect the other characters? You're still causing development to occur by exploring independently with your thinking each of those 4 domains. As minor as it might seem in terms of a strategy, it is major in terms of helping type to develop in children. So, I think the youngest child we've had so far was age 8, right, Nathan? Anyone have a child younger than that, or a grandchild younger than that? No one on the call? Okay. Because I will do it with 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds and just do the same idea, but just asking them questions that they have to make choices on because it enriches the thinking process. So what kind of questions did you all have?
I want to make sure everyone gets their questions.
Yeah.
Nathan, Sandra, Trevor, and Doris, what have you got?
Well, if we just wanted to start using the MTIC, do we just need to start with the facilitator in their space, or I guess it's different if it's with my own kids versus at school? What would you recommend with that?
Okay. If you are you certified, able to use the MBTI?
No.
Okay. So you need to have some kind of ability to use the instrument.
Okay.
People who are currently certified to use the MBTI are also able to use the MTIC.
Okay.
And there is an MTIC certification program being developed that a person could take online, but it's not available yet.
Okay.
There's a 2-day MTIC course which helps people understand development and also understand how to talk to the kids, so you can use language that a 5-year-old would listen to, and then the way you would rephrase it if you were talking to a 15-year-old. But if without those credentials, Rob, am I misinformed, or are we still on that plan where?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. What you can do, Nathan, is that Nathan talking?
That's me, yeah.
Yeah, you can call Katz Customer Service Department,
okay.
And we have a series of questions that we'll ask you. And Elizabeth's absolutely right. Unless you've got some experience with type in kids, we're going to ask you to go get a little bit before the instrument's available. And Elizabeth is also 100% right. We are developing an online self-managed program that would prepare anyone to use the instrument, and I hope to have that up soon.
Okay.
But then once you were eligible to use the tool, then I do say use it with your kids, because especially if the children take the instrument online, because they can take it online or they can take it as a paper pencil and then have it scored online. All of it is scored online. I don't like a parent to read to their child, because I think that without meaning to, we have an inflection in our voice on the answer we think is the smarter, better, wiser choice for us. And it may not be the answer the child would have normally selected. But if the child takes it online, then I don't have a problem with that. And I think a parent can give feedback to their child about the results.
Yeah, okay.
It's fun.
For those of you looking at your screen, I've got the facilitator interface up right now. And so once you do get authorized to use it, this is how you would give the instrument to the children online, like Elizabeth mentioned. And you would, on the getting started button, you would just create a profile. You'd manage the profile here under the Profile Manager, and then you would administer the MMTIC by sending the kids a link and a password, or they could take it right in the classroom if there's a computer right there. And then you generate your reports and do the feedback process that Elizabeth is talking about, and then begin to implement type in the classroom.
Elizabeth, this is Sandra.
Uh-huh.
And, as I said, I work with students mostly individually right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've ordered, after your session in Boston, which I really enjoyed, I ordered several things from CAPT. But, I get a little stumped with articulating and then expressing to kids. They tend to have a pretty strong reaction to, being an extrovert or being an introvert. And sometimes I point to the percentage where I say, okay, well, actually this indicates that you're 69% dominant as an extrovert, but that also leaves room for, 30-ish% to be on the introverted side. I'm wondering if you can offer some, and my students go as young as 3rd grade and all the way through 12th grade, if you can offer some language that helps me to say to them, takes away some of that societal labeling of extroverted and introvertedness and gets more into the type,
Mm-hmm.
the Jungian language.
Oh, right, because actually the numbers don't represent the percentage of it within you. It only represents the consistency of answering.
Okay.
So on the day you were taking the questionnaire,
Mm-hmm.
if you had a 69%, you would say you were more attracted to extroverted answers. But the one thing we know, just like you have two hands that work together, you have an introverted side of you and an extroverted side of you, just like every single person. Mm-hmm. And that if your favored side is extroverted, we call you an extrovert, but you also have introversion you can use when you need to. And if your introverted side is your favored side, we call you an introvert, but you have an extroverted side you can call on when you need to. Because what you want to get away from is the idea that your type code, your letters, drive your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They only drive your energy. You choose your behavior. So you can give them examples of a person could be an introvert but be a wonderful speaker before groups of people or enjoy doing some wonderful socializing and partying with others. It's just when they're very tired emotionally and mentally that the way they get their rest is by taking some time by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that cause them to get tired are different than the things that cause an extrovert to get tired. But one is not more effective than the other.
Mm-hmm.
With friendships or interacting with others or working on teams or getting their jobs done. So you are changing the social definition that we have from other models that have used that term of extroversion and introversion. And you're just teaching them that they have both within them, but what is their favorite side at this time?
Have you ever worked with kids who feel like they're shy extroverts?
Absolutely.
And how would you share with them what that means?
Mm-hmm. Because shyness is going to be a natural hesitation that you're going to have in any kind of brand new situation or any kind of brand new relationship. And extroversion is about the way you get your energy back is by doing things and interacting with others. So when you are worn out from doing a lot of seat work or paperwork, you just are going to say, wow, if I could just get up and move around and talk to a friend for a minute. Mm-hmm. That's going to help me relax a whole lot more. Mm-hmm. Then when your mom or dad says, go into that store and go ahead and just go up and buy something, and you have not been buying something before, then you could very much hesitate wanting to do that task. Now, if you bought from other stores and this is not a big deal for you to go buy something and it's just a new store, then that only kind of causes a tiny little glitch about, oh, I wonder if they'll be the same as the other stores. So the more experience you've had, especially if you're an extroverted sensor who is shy, the better. But if it's a whole brand new setting and a whole brand new situation and you're an extrovert who is shy, you're going to hold back. And pushing a person forward at that time is not going to help because they have the trait of shyness. Mm-hmm. But they still get their energy in extroverted ways. They still need that break and that chance to interact with others. They still need to talk out their thoughts out loud in order to understand best. But thinking out loud helps them more. So stylistically, they are still very much an extrovert. The only difference is that when you watch the social aspect of them, you may be likely to interpret them as that's an introverted approach, which is so funny. It's simply because the common vernacular uses the definitions of introversion and extroversion that Cattell and Eisenach gave us and not that Jung gave us. As long as Jung is still focused on my energy, they're going to be okay. The behavior of shyness doesn't tend to abate as we get older. If you're a shy child, you very oftentimes are a shy adult in these situations. So it's pretty stable over time, which is why some of the studies that came out, I think it was out of Harvard, were showing that introverted kids and extroverted kids are the same as adults because they were measuring traits. See? I also believe that if you're an extroverted child and you know that about yourself, you will still be an extroverted child when you're an adult. I mean, an extroverted adult when you grow up with a type frame, but we just haven't done any work about identifying the type in young children the way we have the trait in young children. So when a child says to me, but I don't want to do that, I'm afraid or I'm shy, they may even use the word, I'd be like, okay, so when something is brand new, your first thought is, oh no, what's that going to be like? And then your second thought is, what do I want to do so that I can either do the job or observe well? So which one is it? Because if it's a party, I don't have to be the one that goes up and says hello to everybody. But I have to go pay for my ticket into the museum. I have to do it. Now, what I have found is with a lot of extroverted shy kids, they do so much better if they have a working partner with them.
Yeah.
You know, just somebody else to go with me, which that extroverted need is met with helping the shyness be taken care of.
Or a purpose or a role. I'm a shy extrovert myself, so I tend to work with a lot of kids, you know, who are sometimes feeling like that. And if you say, okay, I need you to be in charge of the name tags, well, then they're just fine.
Yes.
Because it provides them a purpose.
Now that's exactly because their role then becomes their partner. That's that other piece now. And that because they've been assigned it, it isn't that self-direction, which is what the shyness tries to inhibit, some of that self-direction. So when you, as growing up, can you give a cleaner definition to how that shyness impacted your extroversion?
Well, it's just so interesting because when you were speaking, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but I love to write. So because I'm shy, the writing helps me feel confident before I express my feelings. But I get charged up by talking about ideas. So I'm kind of not a teeter-totter, but a seesaw because I want and need both. And I don't know, you know, I wanted to work out my math problems on a piece of scratch paper before I got in a group where I went to the board.
Yeah. But talking with the others helped you to clarify your thoughts.
Yeah. And
I want to jump in here.
I wanted to say I'm going to have to jump off the call because one of my kids is coming in just a bit, but this is so fascinating and so delicious, and I will listen to the rest of the call and the recording, and thank you so much if I have to leave hurriedly.
Okay. And well, thank you for being with us for a while and for offering your thoughts.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Murph.
Yeah, can I jump in? Being an introvert, I tend to sort of hold back from extroverting on the telephone. But given that I'm more of a psychologist with a practice and a teacher of teachers, I sort of come at this issue a little bit differently than somebody working in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting discussion about extroversion and shyness, because what I have found in my experience, for instance, if you have got really highly able individuals with high IQ, talking about 140, 150, 160, you're also talking about is the potential of young people who simply don't fit into a regular classroom.
Correct.
And what I have found, simply because the teacher typically is not dealing with the appropriate ZPD, zone of proximal development, because they're so far above average. So then you've got a problem of someone who is, basically an extrovert, but can't find anybody to really extrovert to in the classroom. And what I've is that a lot of those kids, and I found it particularly with girls actually, because funny enough, most of my clients who are female tend to be extrovert, and NFPs often as well, compared with the boys who tend to be INFPs. But anyway, what I found is that girls who are ENFP, highly able, but locked into a class situation by whatever reason, convenience or just, no policy to accelerate or any of those issues that we have to deal with, then they can get very depressed and very saddened and can withdraw. So they're withdrawing as opposed to, not extroverting. They're withdrawing into their own little world. And that I find rather sad, but it's a very interesting phenomenon, I think.
And so, again, you're sorting the differences between symptoms that may be associated with a developing need from symptoms and systems that are just stylistically different. That if you're a child who's becoming depressed and withdrawing, then those depressive symptoms are more than just their learning environment, and their whole world must not be affirming who they are. And we are at such a fortunate age with electronics that right now, if I had a child who did not have a mental peer in the room, I would find a mental peer somewhere in the world that they could just have a Skype conversation with once a day, even if it was for 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, Skype is free, so it's not even going to be a cost to any school system.
Elizabeth, absolutely right, but unfortunately you're not in most classrooms. So you get the problem of people who don't necessarily know that there are alternative ways of offering these children help. I think...
You know what, Trevor, that's why we go right back to the beginning, that instead of focusing on the theory, we focus on the strategies. Here's something you could try for those really able children who are looking for someone to have a conversation with about nuclear physics that certainly would not be my domain. I could talk with them about personality, but I couldn't talk with them about that topic. So we can find people in this world who could talk with them. And we're just at that wonderful age when it is possible. But we're sorting.
We're talking about mentors. I've just had a chapter published about mentors and the importance of mentorship for these kids. So, if we can find people who are able both to understand the child's level of development and resonate with their passion and interest, then it's going to make a difference. However, we're talking about the practicalities of the classroom. It's very easy for us to theorize. I can talk to my ed psych students at college level about these practicalities and how they may be able to overcome them. But the fact is, I realize that I am looking from a relatively small part of the world, which is Vermont, and a very small part of that in addition. However, I do know that many, many teachers simply don't have the time or the inclination or the support to alter their teaching style. Mm-hmm. Once they're in it, and they tend to stay in it. That's my observation. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think that my observation is that the more support I give the teachers, the more amenable I find them about changing their approaches.
Well, and I'm sure that's absolutely right. But
we have an elementary little boy right now who fell in love with some kind of frog that's getting to be extinct in the Amazon. And again, I think he's a very able child. But he has started an entire campaign in the city to raise funds to research and preserve the life of this frog.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I couldn't agree more. These are these things that work fantastically. They do. Right. I totally agree.
It's having that opportunity to do it.
It's giving them the opportunity and so on. Now, as a teacher of Ed Psych, an introduction to psychology and stuff like that, I'm faced with textbooks, for instance, that never, ever bring up the issue of type.
You're right.
And so you're getting teachers who are being prepared with being totally ignorant to many of these things that you and I and others are totally disposed towards and you're very, very supportive of. They're getting no insight into this, and that's such a great shame, I think.
True. I mean, there's so many ways to approach this issue, from adjusting instruction at the university level, but I'm at the phase where I really want to work with the people who are right there with the children.
Yeah, and I wish there were more of you.
Well, Trevor, I'll jump in here and let you guys know that Katz is doing continuous and ongoing research on the efficacy of using type in the classroom, and when we begin to publish this, we'll hopefully be give you a little support in your quest to get type recognized in the classroom. And we've run about 1,000 students through these studies so far. And
yeah.
One of the preliminary results is that that grades do improve.
Well, I think if you could get in touch with the text publishers, the writers like Ann Woolfolk and people like that who actually are providing textbooks and get type into that discussion, it would be enormously helpful.
I think down the road that's certainly a possibility.
Well, I think it's essential because my own experience with type is that it's inevitably helpful. It is always instructive, deeply insightful, and can make the difference between a kid who is failing to a kid who's succeeding. And family issues can be solved. I mean, I've seen these things happen time and time again, where when the parent is given some insight into the different sort of types of personality with respect to his or her child, there's an aha moment, which is just amazing. And suddenly they've come back to me and said, well, thank goodness I knew about that. And I do actually use your book quite a bit, Elizabeth, and I'm looking forward to your parent book. How's that coming on?
Always work in progress, right?
It's 3 years now. That's about like how I write my books.
So.
But I think that would be really very helpful. The one I've got, I think, is developing the child, little green book.
Right.
And I'm using that all the time. In fact, I'm using it this afternoon as I write a report for a parent, because I use MTIC as part of this holistic view of the child that includes the intellectual piece, the behavioral piece, the interest piece, the personality piece. So you get a sort of rounded, beautiful, spherical view of the child, and that is so helpful.
My experience as parents have valued it too. Is when you're talking to me about my child, it includes information about their type has been a real plus in most of those reports.
Yeah.
I do to make sure before we come near the end, because Nathan, you're talking about going into the schools, but you're also talking about using it at home with your kids. And so there are many little strategies for teaching it at home as there are for using it in the schools.
Yeah.
And probably the one that I give the home the most is the "for me" phrase, for me. So we had, like, a mom with a J preference. Do you know enough about type that if I say J preference?
I read a lot of the background on it.
Okay. So mom had the J preference, and the child had the perceiving preference. So the mom was yelling at the child on Friday, just finish your homework.
Right.
If you'll just finish your homework, you won't have to worry about it the whole weekend. Well, no perceiving child is likely to be worried about it for the whole weekend.
Right.
So instead, the child just hears it as nagging.
Uh-huh.
All we did was change the way the mother expressed it and said, as your parent, it's my job to check to make sure your homework was done. I can't have a free, relaxing weekend until that job is done. So for me, would you finish your homework Friday night so I can check it and then I can have my weekend free?
Uh-huh.
And the kids will go, yes. Because it makes sense then. If you need me to do it for you, okay. But when you start hearing the language, you need to do it, and the child's insides are going, no, I don't.
Right.
Then all of a sudden there's not as important of a reason to listen. So just little things like for me, changes the focus for, instead of making it a judgment about should I really do that or not, it just becomes let me help you out with that.
Yeah.
Frame.
I had a question.
What's that, Doris?
Who's invited to these series of calls? Is this something that's just started, or I just got on the email list?
This is our second one, and we invited people who either have or did have at one time facilitator accounts for the MMTIC.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
But we also listed it on our website, so anyone with any interest in the MMTIC could also attend.
Oh, good, because I'm in the school system working with some teachers, and I was wondering if they would be interested. Could I give them the opportunity to attend future sessions?
Yes, absolutely. There's a URL that I'll be able to send you guys where we'll post the recording of this one, and the recording of the first one is also there. And periodically, when we schedule the next one, the link to register will appear on that webpage. So they can just be checking that for now. And I've got all your email addresses, so I'll send a follow-up email that has all that information.
And Rob, did you want to mention, because I don't think Sandra or Trevor or Doris were online when you mentioned to Nathan about the offer you made for him?
Yeah. I'll mention that now. Thanks, Elizabeth. I thought that it might be nice if anyone has not seen one of the MMTIC Exploring Personality Type workbooks. We'll be happy to send you one just as a sample for you to see the kinds of activities and the kinds of resources available to you when you use the MMTIC. So I'll send an email to everyone, and you can just send an email back to me saying which one you'd like, because there's 3 levels, one for elementary school, one for middle school, and one for high school. So that's our way of saying thanks for coming on the call. Sure.
Well, I'm very grateful for those who have spent their time with us today. I would like to leave you with one final version of that 4-function strategy. Is that sometimes if you frame it so that the children know exactly what you want them to look for. So in other words, if there's a yucky situation, so let's say we're stuck in that traffic, I would say, help me find a gem in this. What's the wonderful piece that we can find in this experience, which is more of the F approach to life? Or if I'm looking for the T approach to life, help me find the flaw. Where's the flaw in this idea, in this plan? So if I'm not doing all 4, I can tell them what I'm looking for. Is I've got an idea, and if it's really great, I want to use it. But if there's a flaw in it, look at it carefully and see if you see a flaw. Then you're actually asking them to use their critical eye, their eye that's going to identify what's wrong so that we can fix it, which is much more of a thinking approach to a task than what's wonderful, what's the gem part of it. And when I teach the functions, I always teach the functions as first then. So if a child is going to be using freelance, they're able to use all of their functions, I'll say, first, if your favorite is feeling, then you find out what is wonderful about that idea, and then you say what's wrong with the idea. If your preference is thinking, you say what's wrong with that idea, but what's good about the idea. In other words, if you start with thinking, then you have to also use feeling. If you start with feeling, you have to also use thinking to evaluate the worthiness of an idea. And the same would be with the sensing and the intuition. Help me know what we already know and what do we need to know, and help me explore other ideas. So always taking them from both ends of the pole, even if you only remain on one of the dichotomies and aren't looking at all four of the preferences. Again, because it encourages development, but it also encourages people to understand I can look at things from multiple perspectives, and the wiser decision is going to be reached when I've explored more than just my way. That I want to bring out that other part of me. So people being here, I love talking about type, so I am grateful that you gave me an opportunity to spend some time sharing ideas with you, and you're always welcome to email through Katz or to me, so that if you have issues or questions about using the tool or just using the concept, we want to do whatever we can to help promote a good use of this for kids, because it really does help them as they make their way through life.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for attending, and you'll get an email from me with some follow-up information, and let us know if you have any questions about anything at all, especially using the MMTIC assessment.
Thank you.